And we are back. We're continuing on. So, number 62, a property owner has sold a tenant occupied property to an eager investor. The closing for the property is happening October 20th. Rent will remain at $1,200 per month based on the current lease. The tenant's lease expires December 30th. The seller is holding a $900 tenant security deposit. What is the correct entry for the proration of the rent on the closing disclosure? So this is a classic story, a classic case of the test question having more information than you need, right? It has mentioned a tenant security deposit. It's talking about the expiration of the lease, but all we need to worry about when calculating rent proration is the month of closing. That's all that matters. We just need to settle it up between the parties for the month only. Don't worry about how long the lease lasts. The money, the proration calculation is about getting it fair between seller and buyer. The seller has already collected the whole month's rent. They've collected the $1,200 on the 1st of October. And now they're not going to be the owner between the 21st and the 30th. In our case, for pre-licensing, we consider it 30 days, right? So the seller's portion that they are entitled to is for day 1 through 20 because they also get to have the rent for the day of closing. Seller gets day of closing, right? $1,200 per month divided by 30 days is $40 a day. And then $40 times 20 days, because it's 20 days to the seller. 40 times 20 is $800. That is the seller's portion. But the seller already has all of the money. We need to make them give back some money. So we need to make them give back the buyer's portion of the month. What's the buyer's portion? If the total rent is $1,200 and the seller's portion is $800, what's the difference between $1,200 and $800? $400, right? So the buyer is entitled to $400 of the $1,200 rent for that month. Therefore, A, debit the seller $400 and give it or credit it to the buyer. 62 should be A. 62 on the national. There it is. 62 is A. That is the national portion of the questions that were asked. Now the state section. Let's look at the state exam. Number 1, under North Carolina real estate license law and rule, who would not need a real estate firm license? Okay, who does not need it? When it comes to requiring a firm license, what we have to do is we can't hide behind fancy names. A licensee can name their firm, can do business as something without having a firm license, as long as the name they're using is their surname or is easily identifiable as themselves. But if they use a nickname, if they use their first or their middle name or initials, then they would need a firm license. They would need to go more in depth. But a person could be a non-entity sole proprietor, and as long as they're calling it their last name, their surname, their last name, in this case, Davidson, Nathan Allen Davidson, could be a sole proprietor doing business as his own last name, Davidson Homes. That one is the one that would not require a firm license. So 1 is D. 1 on the state section is D. Also, number 4, broker Betty has a friend named Buster who always has depended on Betty for real estate. Betty has maintained a current real estate license in North Carolina. Buster wants to buy investment property in Florida. Betty doesn't have a license in Florida. She wants to be sure Buster has good representation for his purchase. She refers him to another agent who is in Florida, and that agent offers Betty a referral fee. We're okay so far, right? We can get fees from other brokers from other states. We can give fees to other brokers in other states. Under which circumstance could broker Betty accept Agent Allen's gracious offer? Which of these 4 is okay for Betty to get paid a referral fee? Let's see. Betty could receive the fee if she does not enter Florida for the purpose of conducting real estate during the real estate transaction. That is a tempting one. That is one that many of you might have jumped on because you're thinking that is the rule. But keep in mind, they flipped it on you. They wrote this question from a broker in North Carolina referring to a broker in Florida. The client is going to Florida. I don't know what the Florida rules are. We don't know. This is not a Florida course. If they were coming here, this would be the answer. But we don't know if this is the answer because this is having a client go from North Carolina to Florida. So set this one aside. We really don't have enough information because we don't know the Florida laws. This would be right if they're talking about coming from Florida to North Carolina, but that is not the case here. Betty could receive the fee if she makes full disclosure to Buster and her BIC in writing before the first offer is written in Florida, or Betty could receive the fee even if she does visit Florida but does not conduct real estate, or Betty could agree that Alan could pay the referral fee compensation directly to Buster as part of the closing disclosure credits. That is true. The only one out of all these that is absolutely true with no question and not needing more information is D. It is true that Betty is referring her friend to another broker. Betty could either choose to have that broker give her a referral fee, or if she thought, well, this is my friend, this is my family, I don't really want the money, I just want the money to benefit my friend, she could tell that broker in Florida, just give it to them as a credit, basically give them a discount. Instead of sending me the money, let Buster pay or get a credit from you instead. Give it to him as part of the transaction. Then it's okay to do that because the brokers involved in the transaction can give away all their money if they want to the parties within the transaction. A buyer agent, in this case, could give Buster the entire whatever percent he's making. If he chose to, he could give Buster a credit. In fact, you might remember, some of you, years ago, I haven't seen it in a while, but there used to be some agents who advertised this way. They would say, hey, let me help you buy a house. I will be your buyer agent and I will rebate you some of the commission. That has been a method, sort of like, the whole discount broker. When you list a home, we don't call them discount brokers. We call them limited service listing agents. Well, there's the same thing on the buyer side, sort of. Those limited service listing agents are doing less for a seller, limiting their service in exchange for having that seller pay them less. Well, on the buyer side, a broker could, I don't know how much they're doing for that buyer, but they could choose to give that buyer some of their commission. And that is okay. That is legal. And in this case, that's what's happening. D, number 4, D on the state is correct. Number 8. Brokers in North Carolina who are obligated under license law to follow which of the following rules? Licensees who fail to remove provisional status will become inactive until they can complete education requirements to remove the provisional status. That sounds pretty good, but let's keep on looking because there might be a better answer choice. Licensees who fail to pay the renewal fee will have their license placed on expired status. They must pay the delinquent renewal fee plus $45 for each year delinquent to reactivate. We don't have enough information here because what we do know, they say plus 45 for each year delinquent. Well, that doesn't work past the second year because if you go more than 2 years without paying, you have to start over from the beginning. And they don't say how many years. They just say each year delinquent, and that is not the case. It's not just an unlimited amount of years that you can be delinquent. If you're 2 or more years, then you're back to the drawing board. You're having to take a pre-licensing course and start from scratch. So that's not a good answer. Licensees who fail to take required education will receive a reprimand. No, they don't do reprimands and suspension for education. They put our licenses on inactive status, but that is not a disciplinary thing. It's not a reprimand suspension thing. And then licensees charged with a felony offense must report the charge to the Real Estate Commission within 60 days. It's looking pretty strong. Some of you might have fallen for this one, but they were even really tricky, and they used a C word. They used charged, and what we're looking for is conviction. The thing that must be reported to the commission within 60 days is a conviction, but that is not what a charge is. A charge is just an accusation or charge. They've been arrested. Not even an accusation. They were arrested. They were charged. But arrest is not the rule. It's conviction that's the rule. So that's not a good answer. Best answer is A. Licensees who fail to remove the provisional status will become inactive until they complete the education. So 8 should be A, and there it is. Yep. Number 9. Janet is recently licensed. Off to a great start. Her BIC is thrilled with her immediate success. She is within 18 months of getting her license. and has not yet completed her post-licensing course requirements. The buyer has found the perfect home, which is listed by Janet's friend, Bick Beauregard, he's the Bick, at a co-brokerage firm. Okay, what do we know? Co-brokerage, two different firms. It is not her Bick. Beauregard is not Janet's Bick. Beauregard is her good friend, but her good friend at a different firm. We do not have dual agency going on here. This is not designated dual or dual of any sort. Two different firms. Janet's buyer has requested designated agency in the buyer agency agreement. Okay, that's nice, but it's not applicable. Doesn't matter about designated agency in this case because the agents involved are two separate firms. If they were the same firm as Janet, then they would be okay with designated agency. But again, not the case here. The seller of the property has also requested designated agency. Great, whatever, doesn't matter here, right? Janet and Beauregard are great friends and meet often. They have discussed their clients and have shared confidential information about the buyer and seller with each other. Unfortunate, not a great business practice. They're kind of not being really conscientious about confidentiality because it is a very real possibility, just like what is happening, that they could be in a cross-sale situation. But at this point, Janet and Beauregard should take which course of action? Anything related to dual agency is not the right answer because it's co-brokerage. They said the word co-brokerage, not the same firm. Janet's a provisional, cannot represent her buyer up against a BIC. It's not her BIC, so A is wrong. Janet and Bick Beauregard have confidential information and cannot continue to offer exclusive representation, blah, blah, blah. That is also another dual agency type answer, not applicable. Bick Beauregard will have to be replaced by a provisional broker, so experience is comparable. That's not a thing. Doesn't matter that a provisional is up against a non-provisional or that a provisional is up against a BIC if that BIC is a different firm's broker in charge. So experience levels do not matter especially if it's two separate firms. Janet and Beauregard may proceed with the transaction. True. They should be careful about client information that they share going forward. True. Their clients, if they were to find out how much they've disclosed to each other, would not be happy, but they probably would never find out. But D is the best answer. 9 is D. And then finally, number 10. A North Carolina buyer working with a buyer agent under an oral buyer agency agreement is obligated to do what? Okay. North Carolina buyer working with a buyer agent under an oral buyer agency agreement. Do they have to compensate the broker? They don't owe the broker anything, right? Oral buyer agency, you, the broker, are giving them everything, all of Old Car fiduciary duties. They don't owe you anything. They can go work with anybody they want. There's nothing in writing. Are they obligated to advise all brokers that they are already represented by another broker? No, they're not obligated to because all they have is an oral agreement. That is not an obligation. Are they obligated to reduce it to writing? Yes, but when? Before purchasing a property? Wrong. No, before making an offer. Purchasing is not the same as making an offer. Purchasing would mean that offer became a contract. So this is not the right answer either. Acknowledge receipt and understanding of the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. That is the best answer here. Do they have to sign it? No, they don't have to sign it. We could sign and say that we tried, but they wouldn't. But the best answer of these four is that they do need to acknowledge receipt and understanding of the Working with Agents brochure. Let me come back around to the national. I think we left off with 12, so I don't have to make it two separate videos because that first video got cut off. I think we were talking about, we were on 62. So let me talk about the first number 12 and then number 6. A seller is furious that no one told them the buyer. Again, this is the national exam on practice exam 5, number 12. Seller's furious that nobody told him the buyer is a minor. The seller has purchased a home in the neighborhood, is only moving a block away, and so they're worried that because it's a minor, there's going to be loud parties and traffic and disrupt the peace and quiet of the neighborhood. So they're being sort of judgmental, right? A friend told the seller that since the buyer is a minor, that the contract is voidable, and that is true. The buyer's a minor, the contract is voidable. But the question is, can the seller terminate the contract because it's voidable? That's not going to work, right? The seller is not the one who can terminate a voidable contract in this case because the seller is of age. In this case, the only one who can terminate the contract since it's voidable is the under 18-year-old, the minor. That's who could if they chose to, but the seller can't do it just because they're worried about the noise and the traffic. So best choice is no. Number D, no, the seller, letter D, seller cannot terminate the sale upon discovery of the minor's age. And then number 6. The listing agent for a property found no major issues during a pre-listing walk of the property. The seller's disclosure did not state that there were any major issues with the property. After closing, the buyers experienced issues with water standing in the basement. Okay, agent doesn't know any better. The agent did their job. They looked around. They couldn't see any evidence of water. The seller did not disclose the water issue. They chose to check no representation, and they have the right to do that. After closing, the buyers experienced issues with water standing in the basement. The neighbors confirmed that this was an ongoing problem. So looks like the neighbors are ratting out the seller. The seller has been dealing with this problem before. They intentionally hid the problem because they didn't tell about it, and it's an ongoing thing. And there was no evidence of it, so they clearly hid the evidence, right? So neighbors confirmed that there was an ongoing problem. Are the agents required to return their commissions on the sale? Well, the answer is no. Just because as agents we don't have to return the commissions on the sale. If we were in the wrong, they could sue us, certainly. They could take us to court. They could report us to the commission. We might have to pay some money as a result of a lawsuit, but we don't have to return our commission. That's not a standard course of action. Therefore, it's one of the no answers here. So, no, agents are not responsible for undisclosed latent defects. It's up to the buyer and seller to work it out between themselves. Or, no, it's the buyer's duty to discover latent defects. The buyer has no recourse after closing, but you can always sue somebody. The buyer could certainly sue somebody, but not the agent. They would not likely come after the agent. The answer is B. 6 is B that was on the national section. Yep. Because it's a latent defect. That's the key issue here. Latent means the seller hid it. The seller went to some lengths to hide the problem. There's a difference between hiding a latent defect and just sitting back knowing that there's some termite damage in the crawl space, but not actually trying to hide it, just sitting there waiting for the buyer to find it or the buyer's inspector to find it. That's okay. Because don't forget caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. The buyer has the right to look at it and check it out. The seller has the right to check no representation on the disclosure. But the seller would have some legal ramifications if they went under there and tried to actually hide the fact that it had termite damage, like cover it up. That would be undisclosed latent defects. Not the agent's fault, but the seller is at fault here. So it'd be up to the buyer and the seller to work it out between themselves. The buyer could talk to the seller. Maybe they would try through the agents first, and they'd say, look, we think you hid something. Are you going to make it right? And if the seller said, no, I'm not, then they would proceed with legal action, most likely. So B is the answer here. Hope that helps. Clearly, we are in the last few days before the final exam, so feel free to keep asking things. Put it in Notion or email or text is fine as well, and I'll be glad to walk you through it. Whether it's one of these on video or maybe a written answer or math thing, doesn't matter. Just let me know, and I will see you soon.